Every year, in January, Hollywood stars, film critics, and paparazzi crowd the streets of Park City, Utah for the Sundance Film Festival. And for the rest of the winter season, here under the towering Wasatch Mountains, celebs and jet setters flock to its world-class ski resorts. But once the season is over and the excitement fades, this city, of only 8,000 residents spread across some 17 square miles, quiets down to a more leisurely pace. And among the year-round townies, in 2018, there lived a woman, the mother of 7 kids, who was just getting by. Each day, it seemed, she was just going through the motions of work and mom life and then starting all over again, though somewhere deep inside, she was quietly dying. And then, one day, she almost did. From that moment on, she realized what life truly meant to her, and that living it with appreciation and purpose was the only way forward. And forward also meant upward, because the next thing she did was climb mountains. And I mean, yes, literal, tall, majestic, breathtaking mountains. So, are y'all ready to clip on your carabiner and follow her lead? Let's hear Jenn Drummond, world record-setting mountaineer, author, and speaker, take us up to the peaks and down to the lows of her life today on the Gratitudeology podcast.
Will you walk through the fire? Would you ride through the storm? Will you walk on a wire? Will you save me if I fall? Will you break through the madness? Set us down where we're safe. I'll be right here waiting till you find me again.
So that's that. Jenn Drummond, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you for coming here to New York to sit with me. Jenn grew up as an athlete, although her motives were a little more down to earth than wanting to reach the Olympics.
And when I was younger, if I did sports, I didn't have to do chores, right? So it's like, oh, I had soccer practice, so I couldn't help with this or whatever. And so for me, it was, I'll do sports all day long.
And while she may have signed up simply to get out of taking out the trash or doing dishes, she eventually found there was so much more to participating. Namely, that sense of pride and belonging.
It's funny because I didn't know life outside of sports, and I have some children that are not into sports, and that's just fascinating to me because I'm like, what are you interested in?
And where does your validation come from? As an athlete myself, and if you're a longtime listener of the show, you may know that I grew up as a nationally competitive horseback rider. I can totally relate. And I can also relate to that moment when you go from being a teenager whose whole identity is their sport to being in college and beyond. It's like the grown-up version of a choose-your-own-adventure book. You have to pick which road to take next, and you're constantly wondering what the end would be if you chose the wrong route.
I always babysat or waited tables or always had a job to make money because we had to pay for the things that we wanted. And when I went to college, I was going to college pre-med because I knew doctors made money. I'm like, so I want to do a job that helps other people and I'm going to get paid well for it. And when I went to college, my chemistry teacher pulled me aside. He goes, Jenn, I just don't think this is your field. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, let's just talk about this for a second. How many of these kids in your classroom do you know? I'm like, yeah, I don't. He's like, do you want to know why? They're at the library. Do you know where the library is on campus? And I'm like, yes, I know where the library is. He goes, I'm just saying, like, if you go into med school, these are the people that you're going to be spending the next so many years with. And I just don't know if that's right for your personality. Well, I'm going to double down and I'm going to prove to you that I am. And then I sat with it a little bit longer and I went to my business law teacher and I said, can you believe my chemistry teacher said this to me? And he's like, yeah, I can. You have a personality for business. Like lean into who you are and what you want to do. And so I'm so grateful to that chemistry teacher because he had the courage to care enough to just point out, like, I think you're doing this with good intentions, but maybe it's not the best alignment. And then my business law teacher was like, I think you'd be really good in business. Start exploring some of those options. And a friend of mine graduated a year ahead of me and took a job in finance. And he's like, Jen, I'm working for this company. I think you should work here. You'll learn a lot about money and all this kind of stuff. And I still had a year to go, but this company interviewed me and they're like, hey, if you can get done with school, we'll hire you. And for me, I'm like, this is amazing. So I went to the school and I said, hey, I got offered this job. What can we do to package my degree to get out of here early? And so we looked at my stuff, like, if you take this summer school class or do this internship or whatever, we can get you done. And so I'm like, okay, I can graduate. I can start that job in August. So I call my parents. I'm like, hey, I got a job. I'm going to graduate early. I'm so excited. My parents were not excited. I'm like, why are you not excited? Like, well, I think you should just, like, you have one more year left. If you take this job, you really have to stay at it a year no matter what because you're young and you need to build that foundation. And I just remember thinking, of course I'm going to stay at it for a year. Why wouldn't I stay at it for a year? And so I do all the things. I graduate early. I go to work for this financial service company. My first day, I go in early and the lady gives me a tour around the office. And so I'm like, there's the lunchroom, and there's the offices, and then there's this like big training center or call center room. And she's like, so here's the call center room where they're making all the like things happen. She's like, so you'll probably sit in here and the management will be here soon. I'm like, oh, I thought you'd give me an office. And she's like, no, honey, this is where you start. I'm like, but the call center? I'm not call center. I was hired to be a financial advisor. She goes, honey, how do you think you get your clients? So for the first 3 weeks of this job, I'm cold calling out of a phone book and smiling and dialing, leaving every single day sobbing. I'm like, what did I do? Why am I here? I've never heard no so many times in my life. And so bad that I called the college that I went to. And I said, hey, I graduated. I was kidding. I don't want to graduate. Can I come back to classes? Like, semester started, Jen. Like, you've graduated. It's way more paperwork to get you back into classes. We can look at semester, but not right now. And calling my parents was not an option. So I went to Staples. I bought a calendar. I circled 365 days later from the day I started. I'm like, I just need to survive till then. It was actually one of these gifts that I didn't understand at the time because I committed to the commitment. I'm like, okay, no matter what, my brain is not allowed to figure out how to get out of this. I'm in this. And so if I can't use that energy to get out of this, like, how do I make it fun? How do I make it enjoyable? Because I'm here.
There's so many people listening right now that are in a miserable job that are leaning into the chore of it instead of the opportunity. So how did you make it fun? How did you survive? What did you learn from hearing no?
So one, I learned how to not make it personal. And that there opens the doors for everything the rest of your life. They're saying no to the thing. They're not saying no to me. Like, I just have to keep dialing because I'm going to find somebody that's going to say yes to me. And then I made it fun. So I bought, like, I can't even find these anymore. But back in the day, they had these little pop guns that had a foam ball at the end.
Yeah.
And anytime somebody hung up on me, I shot them with the gun to get that, like, release out of my body and be like, fine, I hung up on you too. And then I'd load the little foam ball onto the thing because it was tied by a string, right? And I would do it again and again. And it just allowed me to get rid of that yucky feeling and start over. I started doing the mathy, nerdy numbers, and I realized, okay, 97 no's are going to be 3 yeses, and 3 yeses, one's going to come in, they're going to sign papers, I'm going to make this much money. So all of a sudden you flip that script, and you're like, okay, well, let's go for it. And so my first year out of college, I made more than my parents did combined.
I just love this part of Jen's story because it illustrates exactly what I tell people who find themselves in a shitty job. It's not easy to be grateful for your shitty job. But guess what? It pays the bills. And also, there's a good chance that shitty job's teaching you something. So Jenn made the most of what she was and what was available to her, allowing her to move on to other things, starting her own business, and starting a family.
So I start my own company, and then I start trying to have children, and I struggle. And I had to go to a fertility doctor. Nothing worked. And anybody who's on this journey, I see you. Because those failed tests of something we're born to do are loaded with guilt and shame and story that normally doesn't help us. So finally, after a number of different trials and errors, we came up with a chemical cocktail. All of a sudden, this little girl here who could get barely one egg got 28. So those 28 eggs, they took and fertilized them. They became 14 embryos. They planted 2. I had my son, Jack. And I think pain causes us to change, right? And so for me, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom at that time. And so then it forced me to figure out what roles at my job could I let go of that would allow me more time at home. And as I added children to the picture, I kept hiring myself more and more out of a job, which is actually hard to do. You forget how hard it is because we love this baby that we built. But I hired myself entirely out of that company, became a stay-at-home mom, and lived that story for a while.
Then came a surprise in the mail.
And then I remember getting a bill from the fertility clinic. I'm like, oh, no, I've paid you a ton of money. There's no way I owe you any more money. And I go, no, these are your embryos on ice. Because I was so focused on having a kid, I wasn't really paying attention to all the details. And so we went through what that meant. And I lived in Michigan at this time, and different states had different rules, but you either used them, you donated them, or destroyed them. And I just remember thinking, it took me so long to have this one child. Destroying them just does not even seem possible. And so then the next option was, well, do I donate them? Well, we grew up with Dr. Seuss, like, Are You My Mom? Are You My Mom book? And I'm like, I don't want to have that book be like, are you my kid? Are you my kid? Are you my kid? And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to use them. And the doctors are like, yeah, you might get 3, but probably 2 kids from this based on how they rank the quality or whatever. So another part of the story is I'm breastfeeding Jack. I'm vulnerable. All the hormones are running through my body, and I'm watching television. There's this show called Alias that comes on.
Everyone agrees. Alias is the best new drama on television.
Your mission, Agent Bristow, is quite simple.
This goes badly.
Alias is the series that made Jennifer Garner a household name, with twists and nonstop action. But the episode Jenn happened to be watching coincidentally touched on something sensitive to her at that time.
And on the episode that I'm watching, a fertility clinic gets broken into and they start cloning embryos.
No.
And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. This is a thing? Like,
God.
what?
Oh,
Who
God.
even comes
That's
up with
terrifying.
this? Terrifying. And then in Michigan at that time, too, it was one of those cases got on the news where they switched the embryos with the parents, like one of those horror stories. So it was like, I am getting rid of these embryos as fast as I can so that I do not have that liability out there and my brain doesn't run into nightmare situations. So I literally would have a child, get cleared, like, okay, you're back to normal health, plant 2 embryos, and then see what happened. And so my kids are 6 years and 2 months apart because I had 5 boys first and then twin girls that came early.
So tell me, you're trying to balance, business Jenn and mom Jenn.
Yep.
So where does that leave you?
Again, I'm phasing out of the company more and more as the kids come. And by the time the little ones, the youngest 3 came, I was totally out of the company. And I was doing the stay-at-home mom thing. And I'll be honest with you, I was not thriving.
Every mother knows that all the joy also comes with baggage. Trying to balance the needs of your family along with your own, battling between your own ambitions and your desire to be a good mom. There's sacrifice and guilt, and a lot of hours spent up late thinking, am I doing any of this right?
I had a ton of help, though, so I'm very blessed in that regard. But in business, you get these instant gratification deals, right? I mean, my oldest is 18. I still don't know if I've done a good job. So this mothering thing is great, but there's just not as much feedback. And it is exhausting, and it's a heart tug, and it's all these things. And I remember thinking, I felt bad. Like, I didn't have a place to put the guilt and the shame that I felt that I didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom. Like, I wanted to go back to work. I'm like, but everybody I know, this is their dream, and I should be so happy that I'm living this dream that we're sold as such an amazing opportunity, which it truly is. And for a few years, it was magical. But then when everybody went back to school, I was like, I don't want to be making lunches and looking at Pinterest all day to try to figure out what we're doing for the holiday party. So here I am. I'm not feeling 100% fulfilled as a mom. I feel like I'm going through the motions, checking the boxes. You know, I've had financial success. I get to stay home with these kids. But I don't feel the way I thought I would feel when I hit all these milestones that I was seeking. And so I'm running a Thanksgiving Day party for the kids' classroom. And this mom shows up that's helping me run the party. And in her hands, she has a turkey sweater, turkey socks, and this feathery hair thing so that we can match and run the party together. And so she hands it to me. She's like, I thought this would be so fun. We could be together, blah, 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 blah. I go into the bathroom and I am fighting tears back. I'm like, what choices did I make in my life that this is my reality? Like, how did I get to here and how do I get out of here? Because I wore the outfit, like those fake red and yellow and green feathers, right? Like somehow glued onto it or something. And then the socks matched it. And then the hair tie was all these feathery things again. And I'm just not a feather girl. Okay. Like, let's be honest. It's just not who I am. And I just felt like I am such a fraud in my own life. I'm a fraud. And so I went home and I'm like, I need to make changes.
Oh, things were about to change for Jenn. That's for sure. Only not in any sort of a way that she could have seen coming. In December of 2018, Jenn was doing all the things a working mom does around the holidays, wrapping up at work, getting her family ready to celebrate, doing her last-minute shopping. She was also contemplating her future. She found that she was in her own head a lot these days. And one day, in particular, December 18th, she was doing just that as she merged onto the highway while driving home from a trip to a nearby city.
I was on the highway. There's a spot where you enter the highway. And so I didn't hit the light there. So I went right onto the highway. I kept my momentum and I was going 70 plus miles an hour. And there was a semi truck that must have not hit the light green. So it wasn't going speed at all, maybe 30 or 40 miles an hour, pulling another truck. And at the same time, as I'm loading onto the highway, I'm paying attention to the reservoir on the side of the road. Like, why isn't it frozen over? Are we going to get out of the statewide drought? Just the things that your brain runs to. And so when my brain came back to the road, oh, I'm coming up hot on this car. So I look in my rearview mirror. I go to get over into the fast lane, and I didn't make it. The second trailer hit my passenger headlight. And the second it hit, I watched it. And everything went from fast to slow motion and time dilated. And the minute I saw that and those two pieces hit, I'm like, okay, I promise I'll do something good with my life. Please let me live. And then my next thought was, the only people that survive accidents are people that don't know they're happening. And so I have to surrender to this car. And I have to just roll with it. And I told myself, okay, put your hands on the steering wheel, your head on the headrest, and just breathe. And I told myself, I'm like, okay, I'm going to flip over once. I have enough momentum. I'm going to do a front flip again. I did the third front flip, and I'm like, okay, now I'm losing momentum. I'm going to do some sideways rolls. So I did about 8 to 10 sideways rolls and ended up upside down in the median hanging. And then I'm bracing for another car to hit me because Hollywood has taught us another vehicle is coming. And luckily for me, instead, is this person running towards the car and they're yelling, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm at that point where I can hear it, but I'm not registering it. Right? Like it's background noise at this point. And then he peels back the windshield and we catch eyes. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I looked at him and I'm like, I must not be. That guy's face is telling me I'm not okay. And so I closed my eyes and I wiggled my fingers and toes. I can feel my fingers and toes. He's like, "Then I think you're going to be okay." And he's like, "I'm just going to talk to you until the ambulance comes." And I just remember my first thought was, "Jennifer, you should have said, I want to be alive with my body working." See, I was present.
Yeah, you
And
were.
I was present, I think, for two reasons. So when we have these line in the sand moments, which, by the way, if you're listening, that can be your birthday, that can be the new year, that can be Friday. It can be right now, right? You can make a line in the sand moment anytime you want. And so for me, I made that accident a line in the sand moment for me. And I remember thinking to myself, my life before, I was double gripping and vice gripping and like holding on with all I needed. And the only reason why I survived that accident is because I let go. And so it was a big lesson in letting go and flowing with life. And then the other piece of that accident that stands out to me always is when we look outside ourselves to see if we're okay, they're always going to tell us we're not. Only when we close our eyes and really connect to who we are we allowed to say if we're okay or not. And then when the ambulance came, they carried me out. I went to the hospital. They ran every test they could, and I was fine. I mean, fine. I went home the same day, and I will never, there's moments in your life that are just etched in your memory forever. And I remember opening the front door to my house and just standing in that doorway. And that's the first moment I allowed myself to feel. And I just was waterworking because you could hear the kids screaming. From where I was standing, you could see the pizza on the counter. You could life was happening. And before, I would have been, why do we have rollerblades in the house? Or why is there pizza on the counter, right? And at that moment, I'm like, this is so imperfectly perfect. It's amazing how much we miss that in our everyday lives. And just sitting there and being present to all the magic I'll never forget that moment. The crazy thing is that there was a nanny there. And when the accident happened, a family 5 cars behind me knew me. So when they saw it was me, they got out, picked up all the stuff that came out of the car, and they went to my house and they told the nanny, like, "Hey, Jen was in an accident. We think she's going to be fine. Do you guys need anything? We'll go buy food or whatever." And the nanny's like, "What do I do?" And they're like, "Don't worry, we'll help." So this family sat in the hospital until I was released and then drove me home. Can you imagine?
People are inherently good, and we forget that these days because that's not what we see.
And so they drove me home, and I just, every year on that car accident, I still call them and say, like, "Thank you for showing me like how amazing humanity is."
That makes me want to cry. That's beautiful. How did your kids respond when you walked in the door?
They didn't get it. They're too young.
Yeah.
They knew, they did notice me over the next few months. I shifted massively. So December 18 is exactly a week before Christmas. And so the Christmas before, but I was the mom with the garbage bag, like right behind them, picking up all the trash and all this kind of stuff and watching them rip through presents and blah, 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 blah. And in this year, I just sat there in awe of these little fingers that opened presents and noticed like who ran to the next present and who thanked whoever gave it to them and who sat with what they had, right? Like everybody has such a unique response to all these things.
So tell me how that started to shift your thinking.
Yeah. So I got a phone call after the accident from the police. And they're like, "We just want to let you know, we've rebuilt this accident every way we can to try to make this area of the highway safer. We cannot build a scenario where you live, let alone walk away." And I just was like, okay. I told universe, God, whatever you want to believe, that I was going to do something significant. This is just more reminder that I need to do something with my life. It like spun me into this deep reflective, like, what does this mean? Why are we here? What, and the only thing that I could come out with that made any sense to me was, we don't get to choose when we die, but we sure get to choose how we live. And was I really living? And I wasn't. So I couldn't even tell you what my favorite restaurant was or what my favorite color was. Or I lost myself in so many things for no reason but limiting beliefs I placed in myself, right? So then 2019 became this year of the bucket list. What got me excited? What did I want to do? Why was I here? This life could end at any moment. What's something I want to do before it ends? Because I don't know if I have another year or month or week or day. And so this list was silly, but silly's good. It was, I want to taste pasta in Italy. I want to know what the Great Barrier Reef looks like. I just want to experience things. I don't care if I'm good or not. I want the experience. I want to know what it feels like to do X, Y, or Z. And even more so from the accident, I realized we're all doing life in parallel. And so I am a mom and a business owner and Jen and a sister and, all these different roles. And I'm the best guide for my children. So if I'm living a life that I'm ecstatic about and love and can't wait to wake up to the next day, it gives my kids permission to do the same, whatever that looks like for them. So our lives changed in the most miraculous way when I started being selfish.
This moment reminded me of one of my past guests. If you didn't catch it the first time, you can check out the episode I did with Seb Terry, who started a movement called 100 Things, which stands for his 100 things he wanted to do while he lives list. He won't call it a bucket list because then we wait to do it until, quote, just before we die. But who knows when that's going to happen? And then it could be too late, which is how he came up with the idea in the first place. In his 20s, a friend of the same age passed away. And it made him think, if I died tomorrow, would I be proud of how I lived? And he had to answer, not really. So he asked himself, what would I need to do to be happy? Like, quite literally, what activities or accomplishments might make the sides of my mouth turn upwards? It's that simple. From there, he made a list and started tackling things on it. And similarly, Jen started having the same inklings. With both Seb and Jen, I felt it important to ask the question, we all think about creating the list, but how do we get ourselves to actually do the things? I mean, I'd love to go skydive naked. Yes, this was one of Seb's things. Or climb a mountain like Jen. But I'm busy. And you are too, right? I feel like we're all just trying to keep our heads above water. So how do we make sure we truly live before we die?
For me, I feel like every year, I break it up into a year. I'm like, I want to do something epic to remember this year.
Okay.
And then sometimes when I'm on my A game, and it's not always on my A game, like I want to make sure, like, what am I going to remember this month as? Right? And so when you just break it into like, okay, if I want to do one thing next year of all the things I'm interested in doing, what is that one thing? And then like that helps you get those pieces in. Jesse Itzler has this story called like the Kevin's Rule, where he does 6 new adventures every year.
I like that. That makes it digestible.
On my list was climb a mountain. It's 2019. I'm looking at 2020. I was turning 40 in 2020. So I'm like, oh, this is an epic decade that I'm going to launch. What on my list would be significant to do? I'm like, I'm going to climb a mountain. It's only going to get harder as I get older. And so I live in Park City. We're surrounded by mountains and mountain athletes. And I asked some of my friends, I'm like, if you could climb one mountain in the whole world, what would you climb? And the general consensus was this mountain named Ama de Blanc. I hadn't heard of it, but I'm like, okay. They're like, well, it's in the Himalayas. It's by Everest. So you're going to get to see that. It's in Nepal. And it's the Paramount Pictures logo. So every time you go to a movie with your kids, you can be like, I climbed that mountain, which felt good. So I'm training for Ama de Blanc. And if we rewind life to the early 2020s, all of a sudden this thing called COVID enters the scene, and none of us are training for anything or going anywhere. In fact, a lot of us get to be homeschool teachers because school shut down and now we have the kids full time. And so I'm full-timing the parenting kid-parent teacher thing. And one day my kid's struggling with his math homework. I'm like, we do hard things. Like, you've got this. This guy looks at me and goes, if we do hard things, why are you climbing a mountain called I'm a Dumb Blonde instead of a real mountain like Mount Everest? Ama de Blanc, honey, not I'm a Dumb Blonde, but thank you for that. We'll look at Everest. he went to bed and Everest was still kind of tickling around in my mind. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to climb it. And I'm going to show him whatever our Everest is, we're capable of summiting. Like, I had never slept in a tent before. Okay, so this is a far out thing, but I think that's life. We're supposed to do these crazy, wild things that don't always make sense up here, but make sense to our heart. And so I call a coach. He's like, yeah, I can get you ready, no problem. He gives me a book about becoming an uphill athlete. In the front of the book is a story of a lady who got a Guinness World Record. I'm homeschooling. The only book I can get my kids to read is a Guinness World Record book. And so I'm half joking in a conversation with him of, if I got a Guinness World Record, I'd be a cool mom. He's like, oh, I'll help you get one. I'm like, okay, perfect. And I kind of left it at that. It was kind of like a joking conversation. And then a few weeks later, he calls me up all excited. He's like, Jenn, I have the perfect world record for you. I'm like, yeah? He's like, I think you should be the first female to climb the 7-second summits. I don't know what you just said. What? He's like, well, let me tell you, the 7-second summits are the second highest point on each of the 7 continents. They've only been done by one male, so you'd be the second human, first woman ever to do them. And he goes, if you think about it, 7 continents, 7 mountains, you have 7 children, it's a jackpot. And I got one of those whole body yeses that only like naivety can like grant you. Like, I have no clue what I'm in for, but I'm in.
Tell me about the training for the initial climb. Like, what does that look like?
Oh, yeah. So there's ideal, right, of what it should look like, this textbook training plan. But again, I'm not only a mountain athlete, I'm a mom and a business owner and these other things. So I remember working with this coach. I'm like, okay, I'll give you my calendar on Sunday. My number 1 priority is my family. Number 2 is work. And then number 3 is an athlete. So when I'd give up the plan on Sunday, they'd be like, are you going to climb a molehill? Because there's not enough time in here to build you to get ready for Everest or these things. I'm like, well, you need to. And so then when we sat down and looked at it, we said, okay, these meetings are on Zoom. If I put a treadmill at an angle and have it record on an AI system, no one's going to know that I'm not like just sitting at my desk because I can put the camera off. So then I would do some things like that. When my son had a soccer game, I'd bring a 12-inch step to the soccer game, have a backpack full of water bottles, and I would just do step-ups the entire game so that I could get an hour and a half of vertical training in while I was watching his game. And so it forces you to, again, commit to the commitment. You're going to get creative. You're going to figure out how to make it work. Now, was it gorgeous, perfect textbook training? Absolutely not. Did it work? It did.
You know, for all those people that are like, I don't have time to even post consistently on social media. All of these pockets throughout a day, if you actually looked at your day a little less closed-minded, you'd find that there is time. So here you are training during your Zoom meetings, training during your son's soccer game, and you go and you climb that first mountain.
I went to Blana, did that one first. I loved it. It was the most magical experience. And it was magical in part because Ama de Blam is located in the Khumbu ice. Like in the Khumbu, there's no cars, there's no anything. They had tons of tourism year round. When COVID happened, 0, right? And they don't really have TVs and all this kind of technology that we have. So it was just this abandoned area. We were the first team back. So when we came back to this area, they were like, they gave us blessings and dinners and teas. And I mean, I felt like royalty because we were the sign that life was returning to normal. And it just felt so good to connect with people and to see people and to be seen and to climb this mountain. It was a magical experience. Not every mountain was like that, but it was when you have that first one like that, it gets you hooked.
So what did it mean to you after you actually accomplished this goal, and how many years did it take to actually accomplish it?
My first climb for the goal was December of 2020. When we originally thought I was done, it was June 1st of 2023. But when we, yeah, it was super fast, very, very fast. But when we went to file with Guinness World Record, there's actually a dispute on what makes a continent. And so they're like, we need you to cover 2 more mountains just to make sure you cover every possible version of what this could be. And so I felt good when they came back with that. I'm like, okay, I don't necessarily agree, but I will do these because they're not, let's do it to cover all of our bases. So on October 9 of 2024, I stood on top of the last one.
But I have to imagine in those moments where you wanted to give up, the realization that you had a second chance at life had to come into your mind.
Oh, any of us searching for big goals or trying to do big things, or I think anything in life, if fear isn't showing up on a consistent basis, you're not pushing yourself hard enough, right? And it's going to manifest different ways because fear is intelligent. It's like a toddler that wants a snack and it's going to beat you until you get it, right?
Fear just comes back.
It comes back. And it's creative and it's sneaky. And so every single time I would look from the car accident, close my eyes, wiggle my fingers and toes and be like, what story do I want to write? Because the story that's trying to be written right now isn't the story I want. And it would allow me to reset and take that next step. And you always have to hit it with action because action is what starts to defeat it.
If you could share a piece of wisdom with your younger self,
I would say being kind to yourself makes you stronger. We're so hard on ourselves.
Totally.
And we need, we're here to do something magnificent. Every single one of us has these unique experiences, these unique ways of doing life. And so when we really realize what gets us excited is unique to us, and that's our job to bring that to life. And so I think when we're kind to ourselves and realize the world's going to be hard enough, if we don't cheerlead ourselves, no one else knows how to.
Yeah. And I mean, not only that, back to that reticular activating system. When you go through the day being like, you need to work harder, you need to do better, your brain starts to believe that and look for it and look for evidence of the fact, maybe I'm not doing good enough. But when you start, I've been training myself lately to wake up in the morning and just be like, wow, amazing things happen to me. Why does everything always work out for me? Isn't it incredible that life just always goes in my favor and the universe has got my back? Because the more I say it,
the more it happens.
The more it happens. I see evidence of it everywhere.
I set alarms throughout my day, and those alarms remind me of who I am. So at 3:00 in the afternoon, I have an alarm go off that says Magnificent Mom, because that's when I step into my mom role. I have one that goes off at 9:30 p.m. at night that says Super Sleeper, because I know if I get great sleep and go into my bed, my next day is set up for success. And so just having one, identify what this avatar is and who I'm going to be when I step into that avatar, and then reminding yourself okay, it's time to get into that, or what am I doing, just lets you live your life as authentically as possible.
And a good part of how Jenn lives her life authentically is in her book, Break Proof: 7 Strategies to Build Resilience and Achieve Your Life's Goals. And not only is it a reflection of her unique journey, but it actually provides actionable, everyday practices of mindfulness and gratitude that can change your life for the better.
But having those routines and rituals definitely help for that to show up. So, for example, I live at a street that always has a red light. And I always get mad at the red light. I just want the light to be green. And so finally one day I'm realizing the red light doesn't care that it's red. Only I care that it's red. So how do I turn this into a power play? And so instead now the red light is our gratitude light. So anybody who's in our car, they know that when the red light hits, we have to say as many things as we're grateful for until it goes green. So much the fact that when it's green, there's a little bit oh, I didn't get to do my red light piece, right? And then another big thing that we do in our household is called the toothbrush talk. And so every morning and every night when you're brushing your teeth and you're looking at yourself in the mirror, you're only allowed to say positive things and how you want your day to play out. And then at nighttime, what you are grateful for that happened. Because if you know at night that you're going to be brushing your teeth and you have to say things you're grateful for, your radar is on the whole day to find them. And I think sometimes you have to mix it up because we're human, right? And so sometimes I'll have random alarms go off on my phone, and those are just check-ins. Right? So I call them trigger meditations. Say every single time you touch a doorknob. When you touch that doorknob, can you do 3 deep breaths and just reconnect to the moment? How do I feel right now? Because are the activities I'm doing really lighting me up, or do I have too many activities in my day-to-day that are bringing me down? And so I need to restructure my day to make sure I'm energizing, not just depleting.
Those are such valuable tips that can really make a difference. I wondered what her personal takeaways were from writing the book, and if she's heard from people who've read it and what they got out of it.
I would say my biggest takeaway from writing the book was big mountains take big teams. I think I always set these huge goals and thought I'd need to do them by myself, and that was the real win. And truly, when we set these huge goals, it takes a ton of people to get to the top of Everest. And we all have an Everest. Now when I get frustrated or want to start negotiating with myself on whatever I set out to do, I'm like, no. Who can help? Like, how do I get to the top? I know I set this goal for a reason. This just means I'm not employing enough people to help me get there. So that was my big takeaway from writing the book. A lot of people come to me and say they love the concept of people over peaks. But I think a lot of people are in positions where they feel like the peak is being valued more than their people.
And you know what? That's what makes Jenn's message resonate. The idea that people should take priority over peaks. And ironically, doing so will help you reach those peaks that much faster. As we wrap up our conversation, Jenn mentioned that she was in the middle of putting together a trip to Kilimanjaro for women to enable them to experience, not just talk about, reaching those peaks. And can you believe it? According to Jenn, she's already mapped out training plans that work for different fitness levels and get them ready to do it in about 8 weeks. Incredible. Want to know more? Go to her website, jenndrummond.com. So that's 2 N's on Jenn, JENNDRUMMOND.com. And don't forget to follow her at the Jenn Drummond on Instagram. Oh, and one more thing. Jenn says if you text the word Everest to the number 33777, you will get a video sent to your phone that only Jenn would send. It's footage that she shot herself of the Milky Way galaxy going over Everest Base Camp.
And anytime my life gets overwhelming or the story gets big, I'll pull that video up and watch it. It just grounds me into the fact, like, I'm this little human doing this little thing. My problems aren't a big deal. Like, let's continue.
That's all for today. Remember, if you like what you heard, if it impacted you in any way, and if you think it's a message other people in your life might like to hear, I'd be so grateful if you'd give me 5 stars, leave a quick little comment. Those things really help. And share this podcast with your friends, either on social media or just word of mouth. I'm on a mission for us all to help each other focus on expanding our attention towards what's good in the world rather than focusing on what's bad, one person at a time. If we all did that, even to our own little sphere of influence, the world has the potential to be a much more radically awesome place. Stick with me, friends. I've got your back. We're in this together, and it's a great day to see the greatness in the day. See you next time. The Gratitudeology podcast is written, executive produced, and hosted by me, Jamie Hess. Sound design and studio production by Gotham Production Studios. Our theme song is Maze by Hills, sung by Nadia Ali. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Gratitudeology.
Will you walk through the fire? Would you ride through the storm? Will you walk on a wire? Will you save me if I fall? Will you break through the madness? Set us down where we're safe. I'll be right